He memorized the greatest philosophical works in Shurima's history before he was 10 years old. Sophistine. That sentence is easy to read past. Try not to. A child, not a prodigy being trained in isolation, not a scholar's heir with private tutors and curated resources, but a child living inside an ordinary Shurimian childhood who found the texts and read them and absorbed them not because someone required it, but because the hunger to understand was already the dominant fact of his inner life. Before he had any power, before anyone had looked at him and decided he was exceptional. Just a boy and the accumulated knowledge of a civilization, and the specific quality of a mind that meets knowledge and says, more. His name was Nasus. What he would become is only part of the story. What he chose to carry, and what he could not put down when he should have, is the rest of it. New here? Subscribe. Every week, a League of Legends story told the way it deserves to be. Heard, there was a brother. This is where the story actually begins. Before the Ascension, before the libraries, before the centuries of silence in the ruins of a dead empire. There was a boy who read everything, and beside him, always beside him, completely unlike him, absolutely necessary to him, there was Renekton. Where Nasus was still, Renekton was motion. Where Nasus found the deepest satisfaction inside a text, Renekton found it in the specific physical clarity of a fight. He was not cruel, he was not undisciplined, not then. He was simply a person built for action the way his brother was built for thought, and between them, in the way opposites sometimes achieve a balance that more similar people cannot, there was a bond that ran deeper than either of them had language for. Nasus kept Renekton out of trouble. Renekton kept Nasus from disappearing entirely into his books. They were, in the way that only siblings can be, each other's correction. When Nasus was old enough, the Sundisk Order came for him. The most prestigious institution in Shurima extended its invitation, and Nasus accepted and began the transformation from exceptional child to extraordinary general. Not through combat. Combat was never where his genius lived, it lived in preparation. In the specific intelligence that sees a battlefield before the battle is fought, that identifies the decisive moment 3 days in advance, that understands logistics and morale and the emotional architecture of an army in the same way he understood the texts of dead philosophers, not as information to be stored, but as living systems to be understood. His soldiers did not simply obey him, they trusted him. He ensured they were fed, paid, treated, as the human beings the machinery of empire could easily forget they were. He won campaigns that should not have been winnable. He became, in a fact that surprised no one who knew him, and everyone who needed him to be ordinary, the youngest general in Shurima's history. He was not happy. He won. He administered, he delivered for the empire, and at the end of every successful campaign he looked at what had been required to achieve it. The dead, the wounded, the cities, absorbed, the cultures overwritten. And he thought, there must be a better use of whatever I am. He found it in the libraries. Here is the thing Nasus understood that the empire around him did not. Conquered knowledge does not stay conquered. A destroyed text destroys the thought inside it permanently, and a thought, unlike a city, cannot be rebuilt from ruins. You cannot re-excavate an idea. Once it is gone in a way that stone and wood are not. Every civilization Shurima absorbed had things worth keeping: philosophies, agricultural techniques, medical knowledge, mathematical systems, poetry that encoded entire ways of understanding the world in forms that outlasted the cultures that produced them. The standard imperial approach to these things was indifference. What mattered was territory and tribute, not the contents of foreign archives. Nasus disagreed. Quietly, persistently, using every ounce of the influence his military record had. Purchased, he disagreed. He built collection systems. He deployed scholars alongside soldiers. He established libraries in every major Shurimian city with explicit protections. not from conquest, which the empire controlled, but from the thoughtless destruction that accompanied conquest. Every scroll recovered, every tablet catalogued, every oral tradition recorded before the last speaker died and took it with them. He believed, with the specific conviction of a man who had read everything and understood, what it meant that so much had already been lost, that knowledge was the only kind of wealth that compounded without depleting anyone else, that a library was the most moral possible use of a conqueror's resources, that future generations deserved to inherit more than borders and debts. Renekton joined the army. He rose fast. Of course he did. He was Renekton, and served under his brother's command with a warrior's precision that would have made any general proud. They had traveled different roads out of the same childhood and arrived at adjacent places. The bond between them remained what it had always been. Then came the illness. It arrived without warning, the way these things do. A diagnosis. A week, the doctors said. Alevli more, perhaps less. Shurima's greatest mind, its youngest general, its most careful steward of human knowledge, reduced to a body that was failing faster than medicine could follow. The empire mourned before he was gone. He was that rare thing, a person loved not for what he had done to others, but for what he had done for them. Sataka came, the greatest of the ascended warriors, the soldier queen who had faced the void and survived, hunted. She came personally, which meant the sun disk had decided. Nasus would be offered. Ascension, the transformation that burned the mortal shell away and rebuilt what remained as something that could not die in the ordinary way death claimed people. Renekton heard the news from a battlefield and came home immediately. What he found was not the brother he remembered. The illness had moved faster than anyone had projected. The body and the bed was architecture, the framework of someone great reduced to its most essential elements, barely sufficient to carry the person still inside it. Renekton had seen battle damage of every kind. He had never seen his brother like this. He stood at the edge of the room and held himself together with the specific effort of someone who has decided that falling apart is not something he will allow himself to do here. The ritual was not designed for someone in this condition. The sun disk required the candidate to climb, physically climb, to receive its light. Nasus could not complete the ascent. He did not have the body for it anymore. Renekton climbed the steps alongside him, not ceremonially, not as symbol. He supported the weight of a man who had spent his whole life carrying other things and had nothing left to carry himself. Step by step, the light came. The transformation happened, and what emerged from that light was no longer dying. The ascension gave Nasus a body that time could not erode. It gave him the millennia he would need to read everything, understand everything, pursue the life of the mind that had always been his actual calling beneath the soldier's commission. It gave Renekton, already ascended, himself now, a brother who would live as long as he did. For a time that felt like enough. What the histories of empire never adequately account for is what extended power does to the people who hold it. Not the corruption that comes from ambition, that story is well understood. The other kind, the slow erosion that comes from witnessing too much, from surviving too many losses, from watching the patterns of destruction repeat across centuries until the capacity for hope becomes structurally difficult to maintain. The wars continued. They always continued. And Renekton, who had always been built for action, began to change in the way that people built for action change when the action never stops and the losses accumulate faster than anything can be rebuilt. He grew faster to anger, less precise about the targets of it. The warmth that had always been underneath his ferocity, the quality that had made him someone worth following, someone worth loving, began to recede behind something harder and louder. Nasus watched. He recognized it. He did not yet know how to stop it. At the siege of Shurima, a city the Empire was absorbing through the machinery of overwhelming force, Renekton destroyed the Great Library, not as strategy, not as tactic, as misidicrain release, as the expression of something that had been building for too long with nowhere to go. He killed the scholars who tried to stop him. He burned what Nasus had spent years trying to preserve. When Nasus found him in the ruins, they stood with weapons drawn, facing each other across. The ashes of everything Nasus had believed was worth protecting. It was the expression on Nasus's face that ended it. Not anger, not grief exactly. Something quieter and more devastating than either the specific sorrow of recognizing that the person you love most in the world has become someone you no longer fully recognize. Renekton lowered his weapon. He walked away. Neither of them spoke about it afterward. Then came Azir, the young emperor, the sun disk. Everything that should not have been possible, attempted, simultaneously, going wrong in the specific catastrophic way that only hubris on an imperial scale can achieve. Nasus and Renekton were away from the capital when it happened. They came, back to bodies, to silence. To Zerath, the creature that had been something else before, ambition and access to power beyond what any single consciousness should hold, had made him into what he now was. They could not defeat him. Renekton's solution was a warrior solution. Containment. Drag Zerath into the Emperor's tomb, beneath the ruins of the capital, seal them both inside. End it. Nasus refused. He refused not because it would not work. It might work. He refused because it required his brother to be sealed inside a tomb with a consciousness of pure, corrupted magic for an indeterminate period. Because Renekton, who was already changing in ways Nasus had not been able to stop, would be alone in that dark with something that would spend every available moment working on whatever fractures were already forming. He spent every second he had trying to find another way. Already alone, he could not find one. In the end, with no options remaining, he sealed the door. He sealed his brother inside the darkness with the thing that would eventually unmake him. He felt the sun disk fall from the sky, as the sacred waters stopped flowing, as the empire that had given his life structure and purpose and direction finally, completely, came apart. And then there was nothing left to do but walk through the ruins and wait. Centuries passed, perhaps more. Mapasavaka Fayan. He moved through the remains of what Shurima had been, the half-buried columns, the sand. Ild libraries, the echoes of a civilization that existed now only in the archives he had protected, and the memory of a man who could not forget anything. He lost himself. Gradually, the way grief works when it is not allowed to finish, when there is no resolution, no clean ending to organize the mourning around. He forgot what he had been working toward. He became the ruins in a way, still standing, still moving, but no longer entirely sure what for. Then the Emperor's tomb was opened. Mortals found it, curious, careless, armed with the specific confidence of people who have not yet learned what they are disturbing. The seal broke. Zerath was free. And in the same moment, in the body of the man who had sealed that door millennia ago, something that had gone almost completely quiet began to stir. Azir rose. Nasus did not understand how. He watched the sun disk climb back into the sky, and he felt something he had almost lost the capacity to feel. He hoped. And now? Not for the Empire. That was gone, and he had no wish to rebuild it in the same form it had. Broken. But for the possibility that the long catastrophe was not the final word. That a civilization could fall completely and still leave something worth building from. That the knowledge he had spent a lifetime preserving might yet be what it was always supposed to be, a gift from one generation to the next. And somewhere beneath the desert, sealed, or perhaps not, the door had been disturbed. His brother. He does not know what Renekton is now. He knows what he was. He knows what the darkened Zeroth and the centuries of isolation due to a mind that was already beginning to fracture when the door closed. He has to hope that something remains. After everything he has survived, hope is the one thing he still knows how to carry. If this story reached you, subscribe. Every week, the full lore of a League of Legends champion, told the way it was meant to be heard.